How's it going, everyone? As always, God bless you. Thank you for being here. I'm Gage, and this is Candy Coral Aquatics. If you're new to my channel, hit that subscribe button. This is where I talk about all things reefing, but more importantly, where I share the information I've gathered on my tank with you guys to help you become better hobbyists at this hobby we call reefing. If you're not new to the channel and you've been here before but you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and just subscribe. You keep coming back for more. You must like it. Let me grow this channel. Help me grow this channel. So please go ahead and subscribe. Today, guys, it's going to be another Your Questions Answered video. Today's question is, at what point do I know my reef tank is ready for coral? How do I add that coral, introduce that coral to my reef? And can I introduce too much at one time? So those are the questions we're going to be answering in today's video. Please know that all of my Your Questions Answered videos is coming from knowledge that I have gained personally on my own reef tanks throughout the years that I have been in this hobby. If you have a better way of doing it or a different way, or you think that I'm just wrong, that's okay. Again, I'm just sharing the knowledge that I have learned throughout the years of reefing on my tanks. Before I jump into that, though, I feel the need to share some scripture with you. If you're not a believer, I would still ask, just as a personal courtesy to me, to please just hear me out on this scripture that I'm going to be reading real quick, because I think this is just great for everybody. So this is coming from the book of Psalms. It's Psalm chapter 139, verses 23 to 24. This is so good for what the world is in right now. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Why is this so good? This is so good because everybody, all of us, whatever faith or belief you have, we all have anxieties. We all have worries, fears. We know that there are things that we do that are sinful or that aren't right, or, we really shouldn't be doing, yet we do them anyways. And with the anxieties of the world, we have war all over the place, mass confusion, several different groups that are against each other, spreading hatred and confusion. There's a lot going on, right? So our anxiety is super high. But essentially what this is saying is, listen, test me, God, so I may know what causes me anxiety. And then if I know what's causing me anxiety, I can go to you for it. Cast it away from me, anything that is offensive. So if I'm doing something that offends thee, reveal it to me so I can just try to cast that away. And then lead me to that way everlasting. So we're getting the answer to a lot of problems here. We're getting the answers of how to get more right with God, how to avoid the things that we shouldn't be doing, and then going to God for our anxieties by Him testing us, proving to us what it is we are anxious about, and then asking Him to lead me, God, in that way everlasting, right? So thank you if you listen to that, and I just felt the need to share that because of everything that's going on. All right, so because of that, it's going to be a little bit longer video. I apologize. So let's jump into the questions. So how do you know that your tank is ready for coral? Well, this is a great question. A couple of things to look for. So number one, if you have coralline algae growth, which actually you can see some on the back glass if I zoom in just a little bit, right where that lyretel anthea is. Thank you very much for pointing that out, assistant. I appreciate that. It's like the Vanna White of the tank. So right there is a patch of coralline algae. That's perfect. And it's got that purplish hue to it. So that is an excellent indicator that you have all the appropriate levels of calcium, magnesium, and alkalinity to start growing hard corals. Now, when we're talking about hard corals, we're talking about our LPS and our SPS corals, things like torch corals, hammers, frog spawns, acropora, montipora, and other, trichophilias, things like that. Anything that actually has a hard calcium structure or skeleton is going to utilize calcium, magnesium, and alkalinity. Alkalinity and calcium are going to be the major elements that get used. Magnesium will get used, but nowhere near to the amount that calcium and alkalinity will. So I would say step number one is to visualize your tank. Make sure that everything looks okay. If you've got a ton of stuff wrong, diatom blooms all over the place, red slime, it's not time yet. But if you've got a overall generally clean aquarium, a little bit of algae is fine, but if you've got a generally clean aquarium and you're actually seeing that coralline algae growth, the next thing that I would recommend is go out and get yourself some reliable test kits. I really like Hanna checkers. Let me grab one for you guys if you don't know what they look like. Oh, as I bump the camera. Sorry. Okay. Voila! Hanna checker. Okay. They make them in all different kinds of testing checkers. But I have the calcium, the alkalinity, the calcium, the phosphate, and the nitrate. So they're all separate checkers that you have to buy. They'll run, I want to say they're about $50 a piece. So it's a little bit of an investment, but they're super accurate, super quick, super easy to do. So step 2 would then be testing your water. Let's make sure our calcium, after we get a reliable test kit, whatever test kit you want, we want our calcium to be 350 to 425. That would be just fine. Our alkalinity, you can push alkalinity to some pretty high extremes. However, I would err you on the side of caution. I would say a good starting point for alkalinity is about 8.5 to maybe like 9, maybe 10 DKH. That's where you want to keep it. Now, you can go higher than that, but just know the higher you go with alkalinity, there are benefits and there are contraindications, or there's cons to this. So what are the pros? The pros are faster coral growth. Yes, you heard me, faster coral growth. You will actually get faster coral growth if your alkalinity is higher. It allows your coral to take up the elements in the water and build that structure faster, thus, in theory, growing your colonies out more rapidly. However, there is a drawback to that. If you have low nutrients in the tank, the coral skeleton will actually grow faster than the tissue can, and what will end up happening is you'll basically just like burn your corals out. It's actually really bad to have high alkalinity and super, super low nutrients. Your corals aren't going to get the appropriate nutrients that they need from the water to continue that healthy flesh development. So start off with calcium of about 350 to 425. Start out with an alkalinity of anywhere between, I would, even as low as 8 to about 9.5 DKH would be perfectly fine. And then magnesium of, I want to say it's about 1300 should be okay. 1400 should be okay. And then just check those periodically. So if you test and all your everything that I just said, your calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, and they come back and they're on point, they're right where they need to be, your tank is overall clean. Even if you don't have coralline algae, if you're hitting your numbers of calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium, you're good to go. Now you actually want to start testing your nitrates. So nitrates, you don't want 0. 0 is kind of bad. And phosphates, same thing. You don't want 0. 0 is kind of bad, because if it's true zeros, you're not going to have any nutrients in the water for your coral to uptake to grow. So we actually want our nitrates, I feel like I kind of bounce around this in videos, but anywhere between 10 to 15 or maybe 10 upwards of 20 parts per million would be perfectly fine for nitrates. And then our phosphates, I like to keep mine a wee bit higher. 0.03 is kind of the industry standard, if you will, but I almost like to keep it like 0.05 to 0.08. That's perfectly acceptable, and I have found like better coral growth and coloration if I have a little bit more phosphate in the tank. So calcium 350 to 450, alkalinity between 8 and 9.5 DKH, magnesium 1300, 1400, you should be fine right in there. Nitrates 10 to 20, and phosphates 0.05 to 0.08, and you guys are all set to go. Now, I'm going to assume that you're already using RODI water when I've talked about RODI water in other videos, so everything has to start off with good, clean water. Now, after we've tested everything and we see that, okay, yes, on paper, everything looks good, we're going to start adding our first corals. I would suggest adding starter soft corals and starter LPS corals. I would not... Actually, you know what? I would almost say let's skip LPS corals pertaining to frog spawn, hammers, and torch coral. Torch coral especially, but frog spawn would probably be okay. If you want to do a frog spawn or a hammer, go ahead and try it. Stay away from torch corals for a little while. Torch corals can be super finicky, and even if all your parameters are right, sometimes they die or they get a bacterial infection, and you can, there's tons of reefers out there with more experience than I do, with better tanks than I have ever had, and they'll tell you the same thing, like my whole torch colony died and I don't even know why. So not lower end, but easier to maintain LPS. Frog spawns and hammers should be fine. Some acans if you want to start getting into things like Trichophilia, that would be cool. I would not do scolies. Stay away from scolies. And then as far as soft coral goes, Some zoas. So just find yourself some cheap zoas. I put out a couple different videos on zoanthids and why I kind of think they're not always the best beginner coral. But if you can find some cheap, colorful zoanthids that you like, go ahead and give those a try. Monopora, believe it or not, I think is a great starting SPS hard coral for a beginner, especially if you want to test if your tank is ready for corals. Get yourself some super sweet looking monoporas. Monoporas are actually some of the easiest SPS corals to grow. They do still require strong lighting, they do still like good flow, and they do still have to have their parameters in check. However, they're way more forgiving than acroporas are. So that's monopora with an M, not acropora with an A. Stay away from the A until later. So go ahead and get yourself some nice monoporas. Some things that come to mind, I'm going to be a little biased. I'm going to tell you what I got in my tank. Right in the top here, I got a sunset monopora. I've got a Jedi Mind Trick. I've got a, what is this? Oh, what is that? A Jawbreaker. I almost had to look it up. Jawbreaker monopora. My hand is messing up the quality. A Rainbow monopora, and then that's a Mummy-Eyed Chalice. So monoporas grow generally pretty darn fast. They're one of the easiest SPS corals to grow for a beginner. That's got a little bit of experience under their belt with coral, but is ready to make the jump into SPS. Really, as long as you have a good, strong light, you should be just fine growing monoporas. So that brings me into our next area of how do I know my tank is ready? What kind of light do you have? Because you're going to want to make sure, excuse me, I'm fighting an upper respiratory infection right now. You're going to want to make sure that the lights that you have is capable of pumping out enough par in order to grow these corals. Lighting is one of the most expensive things that you're going to spend in this hobby aside from the stock that you put in your tank. Don't skimp on lighting. Some things you can skimp on. Lighting is not one of them. Get yourself a really good brand name. I suggest LEDs. I love LEDs. Some brands that come to mind, obviously EOTech, right? They make just the best lights that are out there. That's all there is. They're Radeon brands. That's number one. Some step downs from that, because they are pretty expensive. Some step downs from that would be like Kessel. Kessel makes an excellent LED. Believe it or not, Hydra by AI, Aqua Illuminations, Hydra HD. They have some awesome lights. I ran Hydra 26 HDs, 2 of them on this tank in my previous video, where this thing was stocked to the max, full of all sorts of coral. Beautiful mixed reef, grown completely on Hydra 26 HDs. They're relatively inexpensive. I would say a new light's going to cost you about $500. So you can get 2 for the price of 1 EOTech, which is nice. And then, you mount those to your tank with a gooseneck or something like not a gooseneck, like a mounting arm. They're fully adjustable from your phone. You can download the application. You have complete control of all your different color spectrums. They're an awesome, awesome light for anybody that's not looking to break the bank, but wants a really good light to grow anything that you could imagine. So Hydra 26 HDs, they have those are the kinds that I had in my tank. They have 52s, I think they are, and everything else. So it depends on the size of your tank. But Hydra HD lights, check them out by AI. You guys are going to love them. So we've covered lighting, we've covered parameters. Let's talk about introduction of coral. I do not acclimate coral. I don't do it. I don't acclimate fish. I don't acclimate inverts. I've never found it necessary. I have never dropped in an invert like a crab or a shrimp or a fish and it have just been like, bleh, and just like die instantly. That has never happened. I have never introduced a fish to any tank that I've ever had, or invert, or coral, for it to just die instantaneously, or to have died within, say, like the first week. I've never seen it. So, acclimation. Getting those corals into the tank is going to be far better than letting them sit in a bag where they're already upset because it's dark and cold, and then putting them from that bag into a bucket to let them drip acclimate for a half hour for no reason whatsoever, and then putting them into the tank. That's a lot of moving around. The only acclimation that I do is temperature. So I grab my bags, I stick them right in the top of my tank, I kill my flow in my tank so they're not swirling around, and I just let them set. I just let them set in the bag for about 20 minutes until the bag water is up to temperature, and then I take them out, slice open the bags, dump them out in a bucket, place the corals where I want them, directly into the tank, zero acclimation. That's the best way to do it from what I have experienced. And again, I do the same thing with inverts, and I do the same thing with fish, and I've never had a problem. So introduction, just go ahead and put them in. Just put them in. Your LPS corals, you're going to kind of want them mid-level, all right? So right about here to right about up in here, this area of the tank, so kind of like your mid-levels is where you're going to want most of your LPS corals. Soft corals, they're going to kind of want to be down towards the bottom more. Zoas are an exception, and the only reason I have these guys down at the bottom is because that's just where I'd stuck them. Also, if you want to have Zoas in the bottom of your tank, you'd better have some pretty strong lighting. I'm just going to let you guys know that right now. And then your SPS, they enjoy being up top. So the very top of the tank is going to be dedicated to things like acroporas, monoporas, things like that. And then your middle tank is going to be dedicated to your LPS corals. So acans, trachees, scolies, if you're into that kind of thing. Scolies really should go on the sand bed. LPS is like torch corals, hammers, frog spawns. Monoporas can do really well in the middle of the tank as well. They're that introductory SPS coral we talked about earlier. So moderate to high lighting right in here for these guys and your LPS corals. And then low light, some SPS coral can do well in lower light. It really likes to be a little bit higher. Soft corals, mushrooms, trachees, some scolies, that kind of stuff. Anemones, of course, they're not a coral, they're an invert, but still, all that can be down in here, your lower corals, or excuse me, your lower light areas. Now I'm going to give you guys the proof of the pudding as to why I say don't put Zoas down at the bottom of the tank unless you have really strong lighting. So if I go ahead and I zoom in here, so you can actually see that my Zoas here, these purple monsters, are actually, I might even have to move these guys. They're kind of stretched out a little bit. Whoops, they're kind of stretched out a little bit, meaning they're kind of reaching for that light. It's kind of hard to see in the video. The other ones are doing fine. These guys, I don't know if they're exactly happy where they are. Everybody else is doing fine, so I'll just keep an eye on those. But if you ever see that your Zoas are stretching like that, it means that they need more light. So we'll just see how that goes. All right, so just place them in the tank. As far as can you add too many at one time, my answer to that is going to be no. No, you can't. The only thing that you're going to affect is going to be your actual parameters as far as alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium go. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's actually going to take a little while before you really start to see the dip and the usage of those components. But just bear in mind, the more coral, that you add, the quicker it's going to be using up those elements within the water. So you can completely stock your tank from one end to the other, jam it packed full of coral, and you're not going to hurt anything. Just, keep an eye and know that the calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium of your tank, along with the minor and major trace elements of the tank, are going to get depleted exceptionally faster than somebody that only has a handful of corals in the tank. So go ahead, don't be afraid to play around, add as many as you'd like at one time or as little as you would like at one time. Figure out what your price range is going to be and let your price range determine what kinds of corals you want to try to go after. If you have a little bit deeper pockets and you're brave enough, go out and get that crazy expensive Zoa. If you want to be more conservative, go ahead. Oh, I'm going to zoom in on this because this is cool. My cleaner shrimp is cleaning my Liar's Tail Anthea. If you want to be a little bit more conservative, start off with something a little less expensive. Get yourself a nice frag of maybe some cheap monopora. Get yourself a nice frag of maybe some hammer or star polyp GSP. Just experiment with it. But there really is no right or wrong way to introduce coral to a tank. And don't worry about trying to introduce too much at one time, because chances are it's not going to happen. Go ahead and stock those tanks up. Keep an eye on those parameters. And until next time, guys, take care and God bless.